Okay, Anna. So thanks for being with us today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yay. Tell us a little bit about you as a business coach and what do you think makes you uniquely you?
Oh, Katie, that is such a cool question. So, as a business coach, I work a lot with people who own online businesses or are wanting to come online, either from their professional career or maybe they have a brick and mortar business and they want to move into the online space. And I tend to work with a lot of intuitives, which is how you and I are really connected and bonded. A lot of people that I work with are actually very highly intelligent analytical people who have realized that there's another operating system, and I get pretty deep into the intuitive side of things and helping them see how to access a different level of communication and connection with their audience and their people. So those are
Mm.
my folks, intuitive folks.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about intuition and what you sort of see during this time, right? Like we're in this pandemic, we're, in a time of like an unprecedented time that we've never had before. What do you see as sort of the, spiritual lessons from it? And then what can you see for like the future lessons for this time?
Oh yeah, it's actually a really exciting time of change I found. So if we can all think about your audience, if we can think about all of the things that, oh, I wish this would change, or some people I wish I worked a different job, or I wish I actually did this in my business or worked with these folks, right? Or changed my service offerings. This is the time of change. So this is the time of change that we've all been asking for, and it's here, and it probably looks really different from how we expected, change to come about. But the beautiful thing is this global pandemic has created a really level playing field. And so specifically in terms of connection, people are not as trusting of the bigger structures, right? People are losing their paychecks, they're losing their jobs. It's debatable whether the government is really helping us to the level that it could, right? And so we're actually placing our trust more in individuals and more in people that we feel connected to. And I was looking at some really interesting research in China about the economy because they're coming out of this, right? Because they were the first ones in it. And as they're coming out, they're noticing that a lot of consumers are buying more local brands. They're focusing more on brands that actually are ethical and are good for the environment because, really Mother Nature is in charge now. It's not any other man-made structure, it's Mother Nature. And so people are wanting to invest locally. People are wanting to invest in companies who have product and service that is connected to something that's good for the environment, that has high integrity. So it's really created a big space for certain people to move into.
What about service-based businesses?
Oh, service-based businesses, I think, are so powerful. So the first thing I would say is it's really important if we are the business owner to really check how we're feeling and if we're really plugged into the fear and the scarcity, or if we're plugged into that level of innovation and potential for change. Because everyone right now is having to pivot in some way. And in the service industry that I'm aware of online, so a lot of service providers, coaches, wellness practitioners, marketers, what I'm actually seeing is there's not less of a demand for their services. If anything, service providers are more, we might be shifting our marketing to build a deeper connection with people. So really acknowledging what's going on, really acknowledging how it's impacting their lives. I was actually on a training yesterday, and the person who was teaching, she ended up having to nurse her child. And we were a group of like over 100 students, right? And it's just like those barriers right now. Everyone knows, we can understand people who have kids, people who have, people who are in lockdown, right? We have this closer connection to people now than ever before. So as service providers, like really use that because people are craving that trust more than ever before.
So combining the two things that you actually said, I'm thinking of someone I know in particular, right, who is a service-based provider, but she also has she's also working currently for a company that doesn't actually align with her values. And what advice would you give in terms of like starting off in the business and like trying to do something that's more in line with what she values?
But for people who are like, I really actively want to move out of my career and into this other business, I would really look into the people that are the highest level of your ideal clients. I think a lot of times as practitioners, especially when we're just first starting out or when we're maybe still testing the grounds, or maybe we've been doing it for a few years, but we're still a little unsure if this is our thing, sometimes we can end up working with clients that aren't ideal for us. And it's really important, I think, for people to look at, okay, what's the next level of your clientele? And sometimes I have my client do this exercise and I don't tell them like the whole thing. I just say, who are your role models? Who are people that you look up to? Who are people that you follow on social media, right? So like the Brene Browns, the Oprahs, and the specific people in your industry that you love and you love following their content. And what if those people were your clients? Why would they hire you? And it really forces us to think much bigger. It really forces us to answer that question. Yeah, why would Brene Brown hire me? It seems like she wouldn't need me. But if we actually ask that question a little deeper, we'll find, oh, there actually is a specific area where I think I can help her, right? And so if we take that exercise and start thinking about what's our next level of clientele, ideal clients will help us elevate our leadership. It'll help us elevate our revenue because they tend to also invest more, and they're actually easier and better to work with. So I would start there, like find your next level of ideal client.
Wow, that's so cool. I mean, that's such a cool thing to think about, you know, instead of just trying to find any client, right? So one of the things that I heard on a podcast that you were on that I absolutely love is the idea that after we come out of this whole time and, you know, in the near future, maybe even in, 10 years from now, we're not going to see the same kinds of jobs, right? Explain to me a little bit more about what that means and, the intuition behind that.
Oh, okay. I love it. The intuition behind it. So because our world is drastically changing and systems are breaking down, like financial systems are breaking down. So intuitively, that means that we have to expand our understanding of money. Money isn't just something that you get from an employer, right? People's paychecks are disappearing. Money isn't something that I just get from my one client or people who have like launches, right, in our business. Like from this one launch, that's how I make my money. Intuitively, energetically, we actually have a greater potential to receive not just money, but support and opportunities and what we would call abundance. And so for us to even have that mindset that's more open, it allows us to see different opportunities and allows us to receive money in different ways. And I have so many examples of that if you would like to hear that, but
Yeah.
that's the big thing.
Yeah. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear some
So,
examples.
okay, so some examples. One of my previous clients just sent me a message saying that he's a copywriter and copy editor, and he basically does that for his business, right? And he just got someone who contacted him and said, Kevin, I will pay for basically the curriculum that you created. So he created his own framework and someone found out about it and was like, can I please buy this from you so that I can teach it in my class? And by the way, you can still teach it in your class and keep it, right? So that was a big check out of the blue. Someone just messaged me who did my promotional video years and years ago and just Venmoed me a few $100 because he's like, oh, remember that casual conversation that we had about turning your video into stills, like stock photos? Yeah, some tech company ended up buying a bunch of those and here's some cash, right? And of course, the government's giving out money now. There's just like so many different ways for us to receive money and opportunities. So if we can open our mindset to that, then that will help us connect to those opportunities.
That's really, yes, that is such a great point. In terms of that, like right now, obviously, like as small business owners, you've received your EIDL loan or grant, and I have too this week, and I know a lot of other people have as well. Um, what do you say to people who, like business owners, who are hesitant to even apply, to even ask? Because I wrote about this in a previous blog, how there's a study that just came out where women are less likely to even apply because they think, well, I'm okay, I have some money in savings, so I don't even, I shouldn't even apply, and maybe let somebody else who may need it more, like, have it, right? So what do you say to that? And then also the idea that I should be able to do it on my own, right? Like, as a woman, I should be able to do it on my own, and I don't need help.
Oh my gosh, Katie, receive the help, right? And this is where I think people like you were so helpful to me, because I was like that woman. I was like, oh, I don't want to go through all that red tape. And then I was like, what if I find my taxes wrong and I have someone else find my taxes for me right now? All of these, really, they're just like self-sabotaging thoughts came up, right? And that's why it's really great to have people like you. And also, I have an accountant, so he was also encouraging me. And then I knew someone else who applied for, right? So like, we intuitively know that, okay, this could be an opportunity for me. And sometimes we talk ourselves out of it, which is a great time to talk to experts, right? Such as yourself. And sometimes, and what I love about what you do is, like, you get to the emotional part of it, because like like, it really is meant to support us, these funds. And sometimes we have emotional things that get in the way. And honestly, these are the same emotional things that sabotage us in our business too. So having a trusted expert, I think, is so important. And be open to the fact that there's money everywhere. When I was applying and looking into the EIDL, I found all of these other grants that were open
Yeah.
specifically for women too. And can I tell you, like, I also was like, I can't apply for this. And I sent it to a bunch of my friends. And then I was like, wake up, Anna, you can also apply for this, because that entrepreneur mindset is, oh, I can make my own money. Like, why would I need that? But it's like, why wouldn't you? Right. And
Right.
be happy for people who got it, because that
Right.
also increases your abundance awareness. It's
Right.
all energy. We should all be open to receiving money, even if we haven't worked really, really hard for it, because that also is a new paradigm. Because just us existing in the world, and I'm sure a lot of people in your audience are big time givers, yeah, you deserve it, right? If it's there, don't stop yourself from receiving it.
Yes. I mean, it's the reason why so many more men actually receive venture capital money than women, because men are out there asking for it rather than just sitting at home going, oh, I can do it on my own, So how do you, as more of an intuitive, more spiritual business coach, like, talk about the idea of receiving?
Oh, yes. So that what you just said about women just don't ask more. Sometimes it's like women don't ask more. That's an actual fact. And then when they ask, they don't sometimes necessarily follow it up. So I've seen studies where it's like women in the workplace asking for promotions, and they might just take a little step, but then they kind of get spooked and they come back, right? And then sometimes women ask, but they don't receive. And I see this a lot in relationships, right? Where women ask, hey, can you help me? But then when, their partner comes to help them, they're all nitpicky, or they're like, no, don't worry about it, I can do it. Because then we kind of get, what's that word? We kind of get defensive, right? Like, it's like, oh, we're not as worthy if we receive help. And so the beautiful thing about receiving is, it's a very it's a feminine quality, but it's also, it exists also in men and people who identify as male, right? It's just yin and yang. So unless you receive, what actually happens is we'll sabotage ourselves in our business, because people who are chronic overgivers and who can't receive, why would we want to grow our business? Why would we want to make more money? Why would we want to get more clients? Because unconsciously we're like, that just means I'm going to get even like more energy drained out of me. I'm going to have even more responsibility. I'm going to have even less time to myself. And so I swear, like 90% of the people that I ask or I look into their money blogs, a lot of it is actually around receiving. You totally helped me with this, right? Totally. I thought I had my stuff done. And then Katie totally straightened me out. She's like, no, you can't receive. And I was like, oh, you're right. So there's just so many different levels of it. But if we can't receive, our business actually can't grow in a healthy way, because we'll constantly overgive.
Yes, absolutely. And that always reminds me of a Bible verse that actually talks about ask and ye shall receive. And so it's also like, if you're not even asking, then you can't receive. at all.
Yes,
So
and if you push it away, then you're not going to receive too. Because I know some people are like, "Oh, I'm ready to receive abundance," but then they kind of push it. It's like that energy; they're pushing it away. They're pushing people away. So, like,
mhm.
yeah, ask and receive. Brilliant.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I'm really curious and interested in talking a little bit about your work with the shadow self. Can you
Very
talk a
cool.
little bit about that? Because right now, I also see that, right? Like during, especially when this all first started, and people were hoarding toilet paper, right? People were doing all of these things that, it's basically coming from a place of getting triggered from either childhood or your own fears or something else, right? Which I really believe goes into what your work is about in terms of the shadow self. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So right now, a big thing that's going on is there's a big collective shadow because we're all going through the same experience. So the shadow is basically the parts of us that we don't like to recognize because they're all our negative feelings, or like you mentioned, our childhood traumas and wounds. It's all the stuff that we push underneath the surface, right? And that's our wounding, that's our shadow. And now, like, there's a huge collective international global shadow that's being activated around fear, around scarcity, around death, around change, around insecurity, right? So most people, if we're unconscious, we're actually naturally plugged into that. And it gets so deep to the point where sometimes I would find myself worrying about things that I'm not worried about, right? Like I would find myself worrying about my parents, and I know my parents are fine. And I'm like, oh, it's because it's the collective shadow. There's so many people worrying about their parents. There's so many people worrying about scarcity and all that. And so just to be aware that sometimes we can unconsciously be connected to other people's fears, right? So if we see someone in the supermarket buying tons of toilet paper, it might be like, wait a second, maybe I should buy toilet paper,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's connecting to other people's fears. And what I realized in talking to people about, specifically business owners, about their shadow and how their shadow shows up in their lives, most people reported back to me that their shadow is actually running their business. So if we take a moment to really think about that, so the ways that we are afraid, the way that we hold ourselves back, the way that we procrastinate on goals, and the shadow can also show up as self-sabotage. So the procrastination, it can also show up as illness. So I actually have a client from way back in the day. She still messages me sometimes, and she's like, Anna, I just got sick, and she was just in the ER, and I was like, are you okay? And she said, well, I knew this was going to happen because every time I make a big jump in my career or I'm about to launch something really big, I actually get sick. And for her, it was like looking at that pattern and being able to recognize it and also recognize the fears that are coming up.
Right.
Right. And so, if we're honest with ourselves, just look at who's running your business. Are you procrastinating more than you are doing stuff? Are you more afraid to be visible and stand out than you are actually allowing yourself to be out there and being a leader? Is just look at patterns. Look at patterns like right before you're about to do something new, or look at patterns right after you've achieved something big. A lot of times, people, after they've had a big successful launch, I notice that sometimes like people will disappear, right? Or they'll spend all their money, or because they don't have you, right? And or they'll just do something crazy because like sometimes when we break through the barrier of who we are, our ego, and we achieve something great, then all the shadows that are unhealed, all those doubts creep up, and we're like, can we do that again? What if that was a one-off thing? What if I can't, what if I fail this time? And we kind of get stuck in this place. So look at patterns around right before you do something new, and then also right after you achieve something, and also after you fail, right? Like, do you
Mm-hmm.
beat yourself up? What are some patterns
Right.
there?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I noticed a lot of times when you've achieved something, there's a part of your brain that says, um, maybe we should just quit while we're ahead, right? Like maybe we should quit while we're
Yeah,
on the top right now.
that's so true.
Yeah.
Yes.
And and weirdly, I think it's what you're saying. It's your shadow self talking rather than like you may think that's a logical thing to think about, but it's not, right? It's actually something that's self-sabotaging. It's basically saying, okay, great, we've achieved this. Let's not do anything anymore for the rest of our
Yeah.
lives.
And can I share a pattern that you helped me find in terms of money?
Sure.
So Katie helped me discover that I basically felt guilty having money. And so every time, actually for me, like when I made some money, so I got a new client or I had a launch or whatever, I would like actively give it away. But it all made sense, right? Because I needed to buy these things and I needed to invest in this other program and I needed to invest in this other coach. And then before you know it, it's like all the money that I made was gone. And then I realized, wow, that's a pattern because that's happened to me almost every single time. And so for me, it was like, I don't deserve this money. Like what you said earlier about women not applying for the loan, like put it back to the economy, give it to someone who's worthy, right? And that was my shadow, but it seemed very logical to me, right? So yes, work with a professional because they'll help you figure it out.
Mm-hmm. That one little thing you just said, like give it back to someone who's worthy, right? Like that's interesting because it's like, okay, you're basically saying when you don't apply for a grant or a loan or get help, it's like you're basically saying I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of
that's a
that,
good point.
right?
Yeah.
And so when are you going to be worthy? I mean, you've got to start from somewhere.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier too, like the thought process is, oh, well, I can make my own money or I don't need it or whatever. I think there is a worthiness quality underneath it. And also attached to it is this notion that we have to work really hard to be worthy, or we have to do something, a lot of things to be worthy, but other people can have it. Or so those are the ways that we talk ourselves out of, basically receiving free cash. Right.
Yes. Yes. And I think that's a lot of us too, right? Like I definitely, when I first started working on my business, I was like, work, work, work all the time, right? Like never, stopping. And that's sort of one of my coping mechanisms too in the past. It was like, let's, if I don't want to think about something, let's just go and work. Let's work. Let's work as hard as possible. Let's work as many hours as possible. Let's work until late at night, so I don't have to think about whatever other emotions are coming up, right? Have you seen that too while you're coaching business owners, that those kinds of coping mechanisms like pop up in terms of, especially with like working hard?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And especially for women who underneath at a certain level feel like they're not worthy of just receiving, right? Which I'm very guilty of. And I think this is actually a lot of women that I talk to, is we feel like we have to work really hard. And especially if we're coming from this, like an immigrant family or, woman of color, we've been told actually that we have to work twice as hard. And to be honest with you, that's just not true. Like, yeah, be good at what you do, do the work that inspires you, but it actually works against you at some point, because there are actually so many people that I would have loved to have invested in, but to be honest with you, they were just workaholics, and I don't want my life to be like that, right? And a lot of times when people hire us, they look at how we live our lives, they look at our quality of our lives. I remember I was going to hire this coach, and then she sent this posted this photo on Facebook of her getting an IV because she was dehydrated because she was working so much. And for her, it was like, look how devoted I am to my, to my work and what I do. And then I was like, and so many people were like, please take care of yourself. Like, do not work so hard.
Yeah.
Right. But then of course, some people were like, yeah, that's great. And here's the thing, like if you can either work an effort to do that, or you can do work as it inspires you. And you actually, I think, create more inspired work, a higher quality of work, and your energy is more vibrant, and that actually brings you better results. So, and also there's a term that one of my friends taught me called procrastinating. Have you heard that?
Yeah. Well, I haven't heard that term, but it makes sense. Yeah.
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 It's like people who are learning all these programs and all these masterminds, doing all this stuff. And it's like you're learning, but you're not really doing anything that actually improves your life or your business, because there's always a cycle of learning. I found the clear boundaries I have, the stronger boundaries I have, the better clients I get, because I'm not giving away so much, and then I'm not unconsciously attracting people who want to use a lot of my energy. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I kind of go with the energy approach. Like, are your days actually giving you energy? And if they're not, is it because you're working too hard, or you're doing things at the wrong time, or not spending enough time with your life, right?
I love that answer. I mean, that's why I love you, because I think that it is important to really take a look at those kinds of things rather than from a very logical perspective of like, well, schedule things this way, or, do it this way. I think it's really important that we're like in touch with our own bodies, and going back to our very first topic is about your intuition, right? Really going with your intuition. Any last things you want to add or talk about, and or give a tip for business owners?
Um, I would just love to share with your people that right now, energy is shifting rapidly. People are just trying to find new way of doing things. This is a really great time to experiment. This is a really great time to experiment with things that you like to do, with even trying on different leadership traits or personalities, or going into a different industry, or approaching your same exact business but in a different lens, or working with different people, right? I just put on a workshop for wellness practitioners. I never really thought to work with them, but because of COVID, they've closed down their practices. Oh, let's see how that goes. We just had our first call today. It was a lot of fun, right? Maybe I'll stick with that, maybe I won't. This is a great time to experiment. And just because you might feel some shadow around that, bring that into the equation. That's a great way for people to connect with you, is like to share your real feelings of uncertainty, and just have fun with it. This is a great time for us to play around.
Yes, absolutely. Get creative, start to explore, and you'll discover hopefully new things about yourself.
Oh yeah, and isn't that the whole reason why we do any of this?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Anna, so much for this.
Yay, thanks, Katie. Thank you, guys.